Koresh Vale had seen 100 battles and survived them all. He had fought in the burning skies of Caltran IV, where the air itself turned to flame. He had marched through the frozen deserts of Varrock, where even weapons jammed from the cold. He had stood in the command decks of Dravari warships as entire moons were turned into molten glass. To Koresh, war was a routine. War was predictable. War followed rules. But that was before the humans. The Dravari Dominion had ruled the stars for over 600 cycles. Many species had risen against them, but all had fallen. Most fought bravely at first, but after a few battles, they broke. They saw the size of the Dominion's fleets, the strength of their armies, and they surrendered. That was how it had always been. So when Koresh was summoned to the War Council aboard the dreadnought Jator, he expected the same kind of campaign. The briefing chamber was lit by a dull red glow. Around the table sat commanders from different fleets. A large holomap displayed a sector at the edge of Dominion space. A cluster of blue lights marked human colonies. The warlord in charge, Supreme Commander Dareth, spoke with his usual booming voice. A new species has been found. They call themselves humans. They are small in number. Primitive ships, outdated weapons, they have resisted our border patrols. This must end quickly. Koresh studied the map. What have we seen of their tactics? Unorganized skirmishes, Dareth said with a dismissive wave. Their fleets are weak. They rely on old missile technology and outdated energy weapons. They will crumble as all the others have. The room filled with confident nods. Koresh gave a slow nod as well, though something in the commander's tone made him wonder. If humans were so weak, why had the Dominion called for 3 fleets instead of 1? The journey to human space took only days. Koresh's fleet of 12 warships moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls cutting through the void. On the second day, they entered the Sol system. The humans were waiting. From the viewport of the Jator, Koresh saw them. A defensive line of ships orbiting a large blue-green planet. Their hulls were painted in strange patterns, with flags, and symbols Koresh didn't understand. There were fewer than 30 of them, most smaller than the Dominion's cruisers. Dareth gave the order to advance. All ships, forward! Break their formation! Show them the might of the Dominion! The first shots came from the human side. Bright streaks of light and trails of smoke filled the darkness. Missiles. Old technology, but launched in swarms. The Dominion's point defense lasers cut most of them apart before impact, but a few slipped through and shook the hulls of the lead ships. The Dravari returned fire with plasma cannons. 2 human ships were torn in half instantly. Koresh expected the humans to pull back. That was what every other species did after such a blow. Instead, they charged. The human ships broke formation, weaving between each other, dodging incoming fire and striking at close range. Their movements were unpredictable, almost reckless. Some even rammed Dominion ships head-on, sacrificing themselves just to cause damage. Koresh frowned. They fight like they have nothing to lose. The Jator engaged a large human warship. Koresh watched as it took multiple plasma hits but refused to break apart. Its hull burned, its weapons sparked, but it kept firing. Through the battle feed, Koresh saw human crew members moving inside, some still at their stations even as flames spread. One of Koresh's officers, a younger soldier named Valar, looked uneasy. Commander, they're not retreating. Even the ones who are crippled are still attacking. Koresh didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the feed, where a human fighter craft, barely larger than a shuttle, was diving straight toward the Jator's bridge. It was shot down only seconds before impact. By the end of the battle, the humans had lost more than half their fleet. The Dominion had taken only moderate losses. It should have felt like a victory. But as Koresh walked through the corridors after the fight, he felt a strange weight in his chest. The humans had fought until their ships were nothing but drifting wrecks. Some even continued to fire escape pod weapons after being ejected into space. They weren't fighting for survival. They were fighting for something else. Later, in the War Council's debriefing, Dareth was smug. A decisive victory. Their fleets are crippled. Soon their colonies will fall. Koresh remained silent. Victory, yes, but it didn't feel complete. He replayed the battle recordings privately, focusing on one ship in particular. It had been surrounded by Dominion cruisers, its hull shattered, but instead of surrendering, it turned and charged the largest Dravari battleship. Koresh zoomed in on the feed. He saw the faces of the human crew through the cracked viewports, eyes burning with something he couldn't name. Not fear, not desperation. It was fury. 3 days later, the Dominion moved deeper into human territory. This time, they targeted a colony world called New Carthage. The Dominion fleet arrived expecting a frightened evacuation. Instead, they found the humans waiting again. The battle began in orbit, but this time, small human ships darted past the main engagement and attacked the Dominion's supply carriers. They moved fast, hitting fuel ships, cargo vessels, and communications relays before vanishing into the planet's shadow. "They're attacking our support ships," Valar said in disbelief. "No one ever does that." Koresh watched the chaos unfold. The humans weren't just brave, they were clever. They fought like predators, aiming not for the enemy's strongest point, but for the vital spots that kept the whole beast alive. Ground forces landed on New Carthage expecting minimal resistance. Instead, the humans fought from street to street, house to house. Civilians joined soldiers, using makeshift weapons when rifles ran out. Koresh led a small unit through one of the ruined districts, searching for a human command post. The air was thick with smoke, and the distant roar of battle echoed through the broken buildings. Then from a side street they came, a squad of human marines in battered armor, moving in perfect coordination despite the destruction around them. One gave hand signals. The others responded instantly, covering angles, flanking Koresh's troops before they could react. The fight was quick and brutal. The humans pressed forward even as some of them fell. One was shot through the chest, but still managed to throw a grenade before collapsing. Koresh barely escaped with his life. His squad was cut down to half strength. That night, Koresh sat alone in the officers' quarters, staring at his hands. He had fought for the Dominion for decades. He had seen bravery before, but this was different. The humans didn't fight like soldiers following orders. They fought like family protecting each other, with a rage that burned even brighter when they were losing. He remembered the eyes of that dying human marine. There had been no fear there, only the promise of more battles to come. For the first time in many years, Koresh felt something new in his long, bloody career: unease. The battle for New Carthage had ended, but it had not ended the way Koresh expected. The Dominion claimed victory on the official record. They had taken the colony, planted their banners, and driven the remaining human soldiers into the wilderness. But Koresh knew the truth. The humans had not lost. They had simply moved. For days after the victory, reports came in from all over the planet. Convoys were disappearing. Patrols were ambushed in the night. Communications towers were destroyed. Supply depots were burning before they could even be used. It was as if the humans were everywhere at once, striking, vanishing, and striking again. Koresh sat in the dim light of the Jator's strategy room, watching the reports come in. The holographic map of New Carthage was dotted with flashing red markers. "These attacks are coordinated," Valar said quietly. The young officer's voice carried both respect and unease. "They aren't random," Koresh nodded. "No, they're targeting supply lines, fuel reserves, communication hubs. They're hitting the veins and arteries of the occupation. They know exactly where to strike." At the next War Council, Supreme Commander Dareth was furious. "This is nothing more than resistance from a defeated enemy," he said, slamming his clawed hand on the table. "It will burn out soon enough. We will send more patrols, crush them completely, and move on." Koresh spoke carefully. "With respect, Commander, they are not fighting like a defeated enemy. They are fighting like pests," Dareth interrupted. "And pests are exterminated." The other commanders nodded in agreement. None of them had fought the humans directly on the ground. None of them had seen the look in a human's eyes when the battle seemed already lost. The next day, Koresh led a squad to investigate one of the ambush sites. The Dominion convoy had been destroyed 2 nights earlier. The wreckage still smoked under the cold sun of New Carthage. The smell of burning metal and fuel hung heavy in the air. Dominion soldiers moved among the wrecks, searching for survivors, but there were none. The bodies had been taken. "Humans don't usually take enemy dead," Velar muttered. "They didn't take them as trophies," Koresh said. "They took them so we wouldn't count how many were killed." Velar looked at him in shock. "Why hide that?" "Because they want us to wonder," Koresh said grimly. "They want us uncertain." That night, the humans struck again. Koresh was in the field command post when the alarm screamed. The perimeter sensors had picked up movement, too much movement to be a simple scout team. He rushed to the walls in time to see them. Dark figures moving through the smoke, their armor scorched and mismatched, some carrying captured Dominion weapons. They didn't charge recklessly. They moved with purpose, covering each other, firing in short, controlled bursts. The Dominion troops returned fire, but the humans didn't scatter. They pushed forward, step by step, even as some fell. Koresh watched one human soldier get hit in the leg and stumble. Instead of retreating, he dropped to one knee, fired 3 precise shots, and signaled for his comrades to move past him. He was still firing when a plasma blast tore through his chest, and the others didn't stop. They stepped over his body and kept going. The fight lasted less than 15 minutes. The humans withdrew just as Dominion reinforcements arrived. When Koresh walked the battlefield afterward, he found something that made his spine stiffen. It was a Dominion ration pack, empty, left in the middle of the field. Inside was a small folded piece of metal. When Koresh unfolded it, he saw it was part of a human dog tag, the kind worn around the neck. On it was a name, scratched deep into the surface: Mara Holt. Back aboard the Jator, Koresh had the name searched in captured databases. The AI reported that Captain Mara Holt was a human military officer known for unconventional tactics. She had led successful raids even against larger, better-armed forces. If she was on New Carthage, it explained much. Koresh leaned back in his chair, his claws tapping the armrest. "She's not just fighting to survive," he murmured to himself. "She's fighting to win." The Dominion command tried to end the resistance with a show of force. They gathered 3 full regiments and began sweeping the countryside, burning settlements that might be hiding humans. It was supposed to scare the population into submission. Instead, it made things worse. Within 2 days, the humans launched a series of attacks across the planet. Ammunition depots exploded. Orbital landing pads were sabotaged. A Dominion warship was destroyed in dock before it could even launch. Koresh read the battle reports with growing unease. This was no longer disorganized resistance. This was a campaign. One evening, Koresh was returning from a patrol when he found himself in a sudden ambush. Explosions ripped through the convoy, flipping vehicles and scattering soldiers. Through the smoke, Koresh saw them, human Marines, their armor marked with white stripes, moving fast and silent. In the middle of them was a tall woman with an eye scar across her cheek. She moved with absolute confidence, giving hand signals that sent her troops darting between cover. Koresh realized who it was: Captain Mara Holt. Their eyes met for a moment across the chaos. There was no hatred in her expression, just focus, determination, fury. Then she raised her rifle and fired. The shot hit the wall next to Koresh's head, showering him with sparks. Before he could react, her troops laid down covering fire and pulled back into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. When Koresh returned to base, Valar was waiting. "Commander, are you injured?" "No," Koresh said. "But I saw her." "Her?" "The human captain," Koresh said. "She's real, and she's leading this resistance. If the Dominion doesn't take her seriously, we're going to regret it." Valar hesitated. "Commander, maybe we already should." Over the next week, Koresh noticed something strange. The human attacks were getting bolder, but not reckless. They avoided direct fights with overwhelming Dominion forces, instead choosing targets that caused maximum disruption. And every time, the attacks left behind something. A piece of destroyed equipment, a symbol scratched into a wall, a dog tag fragment. It was as if they wanted the Dominion to remember. In the War Council, Koresh tried again to warn Dareth. "These humans are not like the others. They adapt quickly. They do not break when they lose. If we continue to underestimate them, enough!" Dareth snapped. "You give these creatures too much credit. The Dominion's strength is unmatched." Koresh didn't argue further. He knew it would do no good. But deep inside, he felt the truth hardening into certainty. The humans were not losing. They were learning. And Koresh feared what would happen when they decided to strike with everything they had. That night, as he stood on the observation deck, Koresh watched New Carthage spin slowly below. Fires still burned across its surface. Somewhere down there, Captain Mara Holt and her soldiers were preparing their next move. Koresh found himself wondering, not when the humans would be defeated, but when they would decide they had gathered enough fury to end this war on their own terms. For weeks, the Dominion called their occupation of New Carthage a success. The official broadcasts showed burning human banners, captured weapons, and columns of Dravari soldiers marching through city streets. But the reality on the ground was different. The humans had not stopped fighting. They had simply changed the way they fought. Every night, explosions echoed through the hills. Every morning, Dominion troops were found dead in their barracks, their weapons missing. Koresh Val knew the truth. This was not a victory. This was a war waiting to erupt. The warning came in, the middle of the night. Koresh was asleep in the Jator's crew quarters when the alarm klaxons blared. Red light filled the halls, and the voice of the ship's tactical officer roared through the intercom. Multiple human ships approaching, heavy weapons detected. Koresh pulled on his armor and ran for the command deck. When the lift doors opened, he froze. The holographic display showed not a scattered raid, but a fleet. At least 30 human ships were bearing down on New Carthage. They weren't warships by Dominion standards. Some were refitted cargo haulers, others were old military frigates, but they moved in perfect formation, and leading them, at the very front, was a large battleship with a white stripe painted along its hull. Koresh didn't need the identification feed to know whose ship it was. Captain Mara Holt. Supreme Commander Dareth's voice thundered across the fleet's comm channel. "All ships, intercept. Destroy them before they reach orbit." The Jator moved forward, its massive engines roaring. Plasma cannons charged, and fighters poured from its hangars. The humans didn't scatter this time. They charged head-on. The first exchange was brutal. Dominion plasma fire tore through 2 human frigates, sending them spinning into debris. But the humans kept coming, weaving between shots, firing missile after missile. Koresh saw something new in their attack. Coordination. They weren't just attacking blindly. Every volley was aimed at weak points. Every fighter squadron moved to protect another. "Commander," Valar said urgently, "they're jamming our targeting systems." Koresh looked at the tactical feed. Sure enough, human ships were broadcasting. Powerful signal bursts disrupting the Dominion's aim. At the same time, smaller ships darted into range and fired precise bursts into the Jator's sensor arrays. The Dominion had the stronger fleet, but the humans, they had the smarter one. The fight became chaos. Fighters clashed in swarms, ships exchanged fire at point-blank range. A human destroyer rammed a Dominion cruiser, locking its hull in place so another human ship could unload its cannons into the cruiser's engines. Koresh's eyes followed the white-striped battleship. It wasn't staying back like a typical flagship. It was at the front, tearing through Dominion lines. Every time one of its allies was in danger, it shifted position to protect them. "That's her," Koresh said quietly. Velar glanced at him. "Captain Holt?" Koresh nodded. "She's not just leading them, she's guiding them." Half an hour into the battle, the Dominion was still holding, but Koresh could see the shift happening. The humans weren't tiring. If anything, their attacks were growing sharper, more confident. A squadron of human bombers broke through and hit the Jator's port side. The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring as the shields dropped. Koresh grabbed the comm. "Redirect! Power to forward batteries! Keep them at a distance!" But the humans didn't want distance. They wanted to be close. Through the forward viewport, Koresh saw the white-striped battleship turning directly toward them. It fired a broadside volley into one of the Jator's escorts, splitting it apart. Then, without slowing, it angled for the Jator itself. "Brace for collision," Velar shouted. At the last moment, the human ship veered away. Skimming so close, Koresh could see the battle damage scarring its hull, and through one shattered viewport, the unmistakable figure of Mara Holt standing at the helm. She didn't look like a desperate soldier. She looked like a predator who had finally cornered her prey. The Jator fired everything it had, but the human fleet wasn't aiming to destroy the Dominion ships outright. They were crippling engines, tearing apart communication relays, and forcing the Dominion vessels into positions where they blocked each other's fire. Koresh realized what was happening. "They're not trying to win this battle by numbers," he said. "They're breaking our formation. And once the formation was gone, the Dominion's advantage would vanish with it." After another 20 minutes, the battle spilled into the skies over New Carthage. Human ground forces hidden for weeks suddenly emerged from the forests and mountains. Anti-air batteries opened fire, forcing Dominion ships to pull higher into orbit. Koresh was struck by the timing. This wasn't random. The space and ground assaults had been perfectly synchronized. The humans had waited, planned, and struck when it would hurt the most. The Dominion was not used to fighting an enemy that could think this far ahead. Koresh's ship took another hit, and a console exploded near him, showering sparks across the deck. Velar pulled him away from the flames. "We can't hold this, Commander," Velar said urgently. Koresh didn't answer right away. His eyes were on the tactical feed, where the human fleet was now weaving through the chaos, striking at targets with surgical precision. And at the center of it all, Captain Holt's ship cut a burning path, never slowing, never retreating. By the battle's third hour, the Dominion began to falter. Dareth ordered a retreat to regroup beyond the planet's orbit. It was the first time in Koresh's career he had heard such an order given during an active battle. The Bus human fleet didn't chase them. Instead, they turned their attention to the Dominion ground bases, cutting off supplies and evacuating their own civilians. Koresh sat in his chair, watching the feed as his ship limped away. He knew the retreat was not just a tactical move, it was a message. The humans were telling the Dominion, "You can come back if you want, but we'll be ready." Later, in the aftermath, Dominion reports called it a draw. The propaganda broadcasts claimed they had voluntarily pulled back to preserve resources. But Koresh knew better. He had seen the truth. This wasn't the fury of a desperate people anymore. This was the fury of a predator that had learned exactly how to kill its prey, and they weren't finished. That night, Koresh couldn't sleep. He replayed the battle feeds again and again, pausing each time the white-striped battleship appeared. He thought about the moment their eyes had met through the shattered viewport. It wasn't hate that he had seen in Mara Holt's gaze. It was focus. It was the calm certainty of someone who knew the war wasn't just a fight. It was a hunt, and the Dominion had just made itself the perfect target. The Dominion High Council was furious. The retreat from New Carthage had been a humiliation they could not accept. In the council chamber, voices rose and accusations flew. Supreme Commander Dareth stood before them, his fists tight. "The humans were more organized than expected," he said, "but their fleet is still small. If we strike quickly, we can end this rebellion before it grows." An elder counselor leaned forward. "Then strike hard. Strike at their heart." And that was when the decision was made, not to retake New Carthage, but to punish it. Koresh Val heard the plan the next day. The Dominion fleet would bypass the human warships and bombard the largest human settlement on the planet, Haven City. It wasn't a military base. It wasn't a weapons depot. It was a city where thousands of civilians lived. Koresh felt his stomach turn. "Commander Dareth, this will unite them against us completely." Dareth's eyes narrowed. "They are already united. This will make them fear us." Koresh didn't answer. He had seen the human fleet's eyes during the last battle. They did not fear. They burned. The bombardment began at dawn. From orbit, Dominion ships fired their heavy plasma cannons at the city below. Koresh stood at the Jator's viewport, watching blue-white beams arc downward, striking buildings and roads. Smoke billowed, fires spread. On the comms, human emergency channels crackled with desperate voices. Orders for evacuation, shouts for medical aid, screams as another blast hit. Koresh gripped the rail so tightly his claws dug into the metal. This wasn't war. This was slaughter. But then, something unexpected happened. Instead of collapsing into chaos, the humans organized faster than Koresh thought possible. Civilian ships raced into the burning city to ferry people away. Anti-air batteries hidden. In warehouses and parking lots opened fire on the Dominion ships. And through the smoke, on the city streets, Koresh could see them. Soldiers, police, even unarmed civilians, standing together, guiding others to safety. It was not the reaction Dareth had expected. Hours later, as the Dominion fleet began its withdrawal, a single human transmission broke through the jamming field. It wasn't military code. It was open for anyone to hear. The image appeared on the bridge's holo display. Captain Mara Holt. Her face was bruised, ash clung to her uniform, and the sound of distant fire could be heard in the background. She stared straight into the feed, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. "You've just made the worst mistake in your empire's history." The next attack came 3 days later, but this time the humans struck first. They didn't aim for the Dominion fleet in orbit. They went after the supply lines. Cargo haulers, fuel depots, and repair stations across the sector were hit by sudden, precise raids. The Dominion's food convoys burned in space. Fuel depots exploded. Koresh received report after report. The humans weren't just fighting battles now. They were choking the Dominion's ability to fight at all. When a captured human fighter pilot was interrogated, he said something that stayed in Koresh's mind. "Before Haven, we were fighting for survival. After Haven, we're fighting for revenge." The fury came in waves. Human ships began using tactics the Dominion had never faced. Decoy transmissions, fake distress calls, silent drift approaches where ships shut down all power, and coasted until they were close enough to strike. Dominion patrols vanished without a trace. Outposts went dark overnight. Even heavily fortified stations found themselves surrounded by swarms of human fighters. Koresh saw the pattern. The humans weren't just attacking randomly. They were cutting out the Dominion's teeth, one by one. The Council ordered more ships to the sector, but even that had problems. Human sympathizers in neutral worlds began sabotaging Dominion supply runs. Trade routes became dangerous. Every convoy needed heavy escort, which slowed everything down. And then there was the psychological toll. Dominion soldiers, once proud and disciplined, now jumped at shadows. Rumors spread of ghost ships, human vessels that could appear out of nowhere, strike and vanish before a response could be launched. Koresh tried to warn Dareth again. "We've crossed the line where this can end quickly. Every attack we make now just makes them stronger." But Dareth only glared. "We have the numbers. They cannot match us forever." Koresh wanted to believe that, but numbers meant nothing if your enemy refused to fight on your terms. The turning point came during the siege of Far Reach Station. The Dominion had surrounded the station, believing human forces inside were trapped. But in the middle of the blockade, 3 massive civilian freighters jumped into the system, flying directly toward the Dominion lines. At first, Koresh thought it was an evacuation attempt. Then the freighters' hull panels fell away, revealing hidden missile racks. The civilians opened fire. The Dominion blockade shattered in minutes. Human warships jumped in, unloading their forces into the station. By the time Dominion reinforcements arrived, Far Reach was gone, along with all its munitions, now in human hands. The message was clear. The humans could not only fight back, they could outthink the Dominion, and every act of Dominion cruelty only sharpened their resolve. Koresh sat in his quarters that night, watching a recorded transmission from Mara Holt. She stood on the deck of her battleship, the white stripe, still visible along the hull behind her. "You've burned our cities," she said. "You've taken our worlds, but you have not broken us. You have taught us how to win." Koresh shut off the recording and sat in silence. He had been a soldier his whole life. He had fought many enemies, but he had never seen an opponent like this. This wasn't just war anymore. This was personal. The stars above New Carthage burned with cold light, but the real fire was on the ground and in space, where the final battle was about to unfold. Koresh Val stood on the command deck of the Jator, watching as the human fleet gathered in orbit. It was unlike any fleet he had ever seen, smaller in size than the Dominion's armada, but moving with purpose and fierce confidence. At their center was the white-striped battleship of Captain Mara Holt. The Dominion had prepared for this moment. They had reinforced every station, brought in fresh troops, and deployed their best warships. The High Council demanded a crushing victory to end the war once and for all. Supreme Commander Dareth was confident. He called Koresh to the war room. "This will be their last stand," Dareth said. "We will show them the true power of the Dominion." Koresh said nothing, but inside, a cold warning stirred in his chest. The battle began with a thunderous roar. Dominion warships launched. Volleys of plasma and missiles at the human fleet. The humans responded with equal ferocity. But this time, they had learned from every encounter. Their ships moved in patterns that confused Dominion targeting systems. Their fighters darted between volleys, striking at weak points and retreating. Before counterattack, Koresh watched as Mara Holt's battleship led from the front, not hiding behind the fleet. It seemed to dance among enemy fire, its weapons blazing, shields holding strong against overwhelming odds. As the fight went on, Koresh received reports from the ground. The humans had launched a coordinated strike deep into Dominion-held cities, saboteurs, and commandos moved through the streets, destroying supply caches, hacking communication arrays, and freeing prisoners. For every Dominion soldier that fell in space, many more were overwhelmed on the ground. Koresh found himself on the bridge. As a warning came in, "Commander, we have multiple boarding parties on the Jator. His blood ran cold." The Jator was the flagship. It should have been the safest place. Through the viewport, he saw human fighters clinging to the hull like insects, armed with explosives and magnetic weapons. The boarding fight was brutal and close. Koresh grabbed a pulse rifle and moved to join the defense teams. The corridors echoed with gunfire and shouted orders. The humans fought fiercely, not just with weapons, but with fists and knives. Some were injured, but none gave up. Koresh saw Captain Mara Holt herself enter the fray, cutting through Dominion soldiers with precision and rage. The tide of the battle shifted in those moments. The Dominion crew, trained for war, but not for this level of ferocity, began to falter. Koresh found himself pinned down in a corridor, with human soldiers closing in from both sides. In that moment, he looked into the eyes of a young human fighter. Bloodied, exhausted, but unyielding, Koresh realized the truth. This was not just a fight over territory or pride. It was a fight for survival, for family, for everything they held dear. With a roar, Koresh charged forward, breaking through the human line. But it was clear, the battle was lost. The humans controlled the Jator. Dareth's voice crackled over the comm, ordering retreat. The flagship was lost, and with it, the war was slipping away. After the battle, Koresh was taken prisoner. As he sat in a dim cell, he thought about everything he had witnessed. The humans had not only survived, they had thrived under pressure. They had turned hatred into strength, fear into fury. He wrote his report to the Dominion High Council, warning them in no uncertain terms. Do not mistake humanity's patience for weakness. They forgive nothing and forget nothing. Any future war with humans will be fought on their terms, and the price will be far greater than you imagine. Years later, Koresh would remember the moment he looked into the eyes of that human soldier. He would remember the rage, the determination, the unwillingness to back down. And he would know that the Dominion had met an enemy unlike any other. The galaxy would never forget the fury of humanity.